We promised the American people, and in order to do that, in a 50-50 Senate, we've got to get to the place where I get 50 votes so that the Vice President of the United States can break the tie, or I get 51 votes without her. And so I'm going to say something outrageous. I have never been particularly poor at calculating how to get things done in the United States Senate. So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway, we're going to get a lot done. And if we have to, if there's complete lockdown and chaos as a consequence of the filibuster, then we'll have to go beyond what I'm talking about.
All right. How's everybody doing today? Thursday night. It's time for Left Reckoning. My name is David Griscom, and I'm broadcasting to you live from the great state of Texas. Joined, as always, by my friend and co-host, Matt Leck. How's it going, brother?
It's going very well, David.
It's feeling good, man. Bernie's on his way down south right now. We love seeing that. It's an incredible moment. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. But we got a great show for y'all tonight. In just a little bit, we're going to be joined by Kshama Sawant, a council member in Seattle who has been such a trailblazer for the socialist movement, talking about her fight with big money interests that are trying to subvert democracy in that city. Then after that, we're joined by good friend, good time, good man, Wosny Lambre. Some of y'all might know him as Big Y. So we're going to be talking about the union history of the NBA. It's going to be a good time. But we should start with the big news. I mean, this show has really, since we started, the big story has been this union fight in Alabama. And we are coming up at this crucial moment where we will see the end of voting, of this voting period. And we'll be able to see the results for this incredible movement, this incredible moment in history of organizing and really incredible solidarity from across the country. And I think that that's one thing that I'm very confident going into this weekend with is how much support the workers in Alabama have been able to see and receive from all across the globe, not just in the United States, internationally. It's been a really beautiful thing. A beautiful thing to see. And I also just wanted to mention off the top, hearts and solidarity with everyone across the South who are facing the devastation of these terrible tornadoes, which have also hit Alabama extremely hard. So our hearts go out to everybody there. But we wanted to take a moment and say, one, it's incredible to see Bernie back out on the trail. It was fun, doing prep for this. We were watching, they put out those kind of old school glossy Bernie Sanders videos. I miss seeing that.
The media team is still here. Media team still making videos. Just because we're not in the campaign doesn't mean we can't make a video or two, okay? My Bernie's lost.
Dude, I know. It's like, I mean, how long has it been, Bernie or Trump?
Yeah.
The good old days. We need to bring them both back. But look, we've talked a lot about this movement on this show, and I just want to reiterate. This is people are framing it as a David and Goliath story, but at the end of the day, this is just people realizing our potential. Because once we realize that working people across the globe have the power, these stories won't be David and Goliath stories anymore, right? We need to recognize our own strength, and this is an incredible opportunity to do that. But obviously, Amazon is a huge corporation with incredible resources, and they have been doing everything that they can to stop it. From encouraging and basically telling contract workers there that they have to wear anti-union pins, to taking workers off of the line, to just fill them with propaganda, to plastering up the entire workplace with anti-union messages, to that really ridiculous website that they may do it without dues. They have been full force trying to muddy the waters as much as possible. And I think if you have this, I think the interaction that we saw just this week with Bernie Sanders and this C-suite asshole, this little chicken shit, really highlights it.
Yeah, so I'll go back off from the Pocan thing so basically Bernie said some stuff, and he doesn't actually I don't actually have Bernie's original tweet here, but we'll go to a guy named Dave Clark, who I don't know how much money he makes, but I'd be very interested to find out. But he says, I welcome Senator Sanders to Birmingham and appreciate his push for a progressive workplace, which is not to say a unionized one. Let's just make that clear. I often say we are the Bernie Sanders of employers, but that's not quite right because we actually deliver a progressive workplace, which again is not to say a unionized one because Bernie Sanders' campaign was unionized, as like Nina Turner pointed out. And he goes on to say 2/3 for our constituents, a $15 minimum wage, healthcare, which again, like as the union organizers for Bessemer pointed out, $15 isn't. That's not what these workers are asking for. They're asking for actually over that. So the $15 talk is a red herring. And so he goes down to say Bernie should have passed a minimum wage in Vermont, even though that was attempted and it was vetoed earlier this year, for instance. And I'm assumed it was multiple other times. And Bernie is a senator, not in local governance. But
also, wait, before we lose this $15 an hour peg too, it also should be noted that other warehouse workers in the area who are unionized make way more than $15 an hour. Right. So Amazon trying to present themselves as some kind of exceptional leader in the industry is not true, especially when you compare Amazon wages and benefits to union wages and benefits.
That part and that emphasis is probably the only thing that's actually smart about what they're doing in terms of communications. Because as we'll see here, this is Mark Pocan tweeted out Dave Clark and he said this: paying workers $15 an hour doesn't make you a quote progressive workplace when you union bust and make workers urinate in bottles. Amazon News gets in says, you don't really believe the peeing in bottles thing, do you? Which is not to say anything about the union busted thing again. If that were true, nobody would work for us. Now that I must say, I didn't. Let me just bring the camera back to us for a second. I believe someone could just cynically lie about that. What that reads to me is that some low-level intern that's probably 25 or something is running the Amazon and literally believes that it's all lies. Because I went to school with, for instance, somebody who was on the BP social media account, and like it is like these lower-level people who, again, like probably are lied to by management about the severity of some of these things. So it's amazing. And so I think that's kind of what we're seeing here. But anyway, the tone is amazing because as we'll see, this is absolutely, this amounts to a lie. Whether the functionary believed this or not, this is a lie from the corporate that they sanction this BS. You don't really believe the peanut bottles thing, do you? If that were true, nobody would work for us. The truth is that we have over 1 million incredible employees around the world who are proud of what they do and have great wages and health care from day one. Now, I want to go back to Ken's. Well, let's play a little bit from this Amazon warehouse workers video put out first before we get to some actual documents that show that is a corporate lie. Tweeted
this is
out.
Really powerful, and it shows the stakes that that this fight is on.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I had the opportunity to talk to Jeff Bezos face to face, I would really want to ask him, have he ever worked in a warehouse before? Have he sweated for 10 to 12 hours a day and not being able to go to the restroom when he needed to go?
And the issue of working conditions, I'm very proud of our working conditions.
They got cameras, they watching us all the time.
It's a lot of walking, it's a lot of fast pace, it's a lot of climbing upstairs. It's just a lot for the human body.
It's tiring, it's consistent, it's fast speed. It's unsafe because you consistently working fast pace 10 hours, only 2 breaks.
They getting treated like robots and it's not fair because even robots break down sometimes.
I mean, if that doesn't, make you filled with frustration and also hope for a better world, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, this is one of the most basic criticisms of capitalism, going all the way back to the early socialists, and Marx was talking about how it tries to turn human beings into machines, and that's something we absolutely have to reject.
Yeah, and I want to go to Ken Klippenstein's reporting in The Intercept that he has this document, an email sent by an Amazon logistics area manager in May 2020. And I'll just read a little bit from here. We've noticed an uptick recently in all kinds of unsanitary garbage being left inside. Used masks, gloves, bottles of urine. By scanning the QR code in the bag, we can... I mean, think about, in terms of... in addition to the workers not having enough time to use the bathroom of this, the dystopian surveillance element of this.
Yeah.
By scanning the QR code on the bag, we can easily identify the DA who was in possession of the bag. These behaviors are unacceptable and will result in a tier 1 infractions going forward. Please communicate this message to your drivers. I know it may seem obvious or like something you shouldn't need to coach, but please be explicit when communicating the message that they, in all caps, cannot poop or leave bottles of urine inside plastic bags. So again, this is official Amazon logistics communications and acknowledging this reality, which is disgusting, which is happening on a mass scale.
It's happening on a mass scale, and the way that email is written is so disgusting, right? Because they're making it seem like these people don't have like manners or something like that. People are doing this not because it's something that they want to be doing. It's because they are scared about what will happen if they don't meet the absurd quotas that Amazon puts on them. They don't want to face the punishment that Amazon will deal to them if they don't reach certain thresholds. This system at Amazon is based on hyper exploitation, right? And you do that by making your workers as afraid as possible. And the conditions that you hear about are a lot that we've been focusing on the bathroom, right? But you even talk about like people's lunch break. The distance between where they are working to the part of the facility where they are able to eat takes about 10, 15 minutes to walk across, right? And if you are already in an environment like Amazon, where you're being watched constantly, that means that people are barely getting enough time to eat in the first place, right? These are all these just horrible working conditions, along with the fact that, and this is one of the things that's really great, I highly suggest people check out Kim Kelly's reporting, and all of the different outlets that she's been reporting in. She has a very good piece that just came out in Vox. But one of the really great aspects of the organizing, the union push there has been workers saying, not only, okay, we want our conditions to be better, we want a higher wage ceiling, and also recognizing that these people are making insane amounts of money off of our labor. And where is the reward and benefit for us, right? It's talking a really big structural shift, not just like little bumps to, people's pay, really understanding that this entire system is, exploiting them on a mass scale to make a few people the wealthiest people in the world.
Well said, David. So folks, if you're enjoying the show, become a patron, patreon.com/leftreckoning. We have some interesting historical stuff planned for you. Do you want to tease that now or?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I don't know when exactly we're going to be able to release it, but we're going to do something awesome with our friend Paul Connell on James Connolly, which is going to be a really, really, and for folks who aren't familiar, James Connolly is one of the great Irish socialists. And it will be able to sort of break down his legacy and also his importance today. And this is going to be an ongoing series where we're going to get to talk to all of these great friends and thinkers that we have in our in our orbit about political thinkers that are really important to them. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So that will be up for patrons, hopefully by not this Sunday, but the Sunday after that, or if not, shortly. So definitely, if you're interested in that, and also if you have suggestions for future ones, definitely shoot those our way at patreon.com/leftreckoning. And we'll also be, you also get access to post-game theory readings and lots of other bonus content as well.
All right. Yeah. I just want to say before we play this, Kshama Sawant, it was great to talk with her. Yeah, she's a figure, like David mentioned earlier, who was one of the original project. You know, it's one of many things in politics that reminds me of Michael, because I remember like when I was new to Majority Report and we were talking about, different models of this. She was one of the only people who had done it. This is pre-Bernie, right? Like, and so a lot of respect for her and a lot of disdain and indignant aim towards the people trying to recall her. And if there's anything you want to say, David, before we run this, you can go ahead.
No, this is definitely, if you're interested in helping out Kshama Sawant and the movement, we put in the description of the video, the Kshama Solidarity links, so that you can get involved. And this is a really fun interview, and just not to tease too much, but definitely is going to be the first of many. We had a really fun conversation after the interview was recorded, planning out some more content down the line. So look forward to that too.
All right, here you go, folks. We'll see you in a half hour with Wosny Lambre.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to Left Reckoning. We're very, very excited to be joined today by Council Member Kshama Sawant, who is somebody whose political work I've been following for a very long time. It's a real great honor to be able to speak with her today. And thank you so much, Kshama, for joining us today on Left Reckoning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, there's something that we have to talk about, and I think we're going to focus on for the majority of this interview. Since you've been elected to the city council in Seattle, you've been involved in a lot of high-profile fights. To stand up for working people, to stand up for unhoused folks, and to stand up against our incredibly racist criminal justice system. And in that process, you've made a lot of powerful enemies. And there is yet again another kind of astroturfed movement to remove you from office. Could you talk about basically what's happening and the actors behind this recall movement?
Absolutely. As you were correctly saying, David, there's a recall campaign against my council office, and that is very much being promoted by the right wing, by big business, by the establishment here in this city. The recall has 4 charges. They claim that I've broken the law. Let me be perfectly clear right from the get-go. I have broken no law whatsoever. All those charges are based in falsehood. And I think the recall campaign itself brings up a larger question about the Washington state law on recall, which does not require the truth to be tested in those recall charges. Unfortunately, and every time I tell people about this, people are amazed that that's true, but that is indeed true. In fact, the recall law in this state is specifically written such that it allows wealthy people and the ruling class to have a do-over of election results that they do not like. And it really is a way in which they can use the legal system against working class elected representatives. And we are seeing that play out right now. And it's no coincidence that 2 of those 4 charges are directly related to my commitment to the Black Lives Matter movement. And it is situated in the larger context of the real backlash from the ruling class against the nationwide Black Lives Matter movement. It's not a coincidence, for example, that 14,000 BLM activists faced arrests last year. And so if this recall succeeds, they will absolutely use it as a template against other movement leaders and against the movement as a whole. And bottom line is, as you were suggesting, this is an attack on us because they don't want a successful example of an elected office that truly stands with movements and not just expresses that in rhetoric, but has an overwhelming track record of victory after victory, everything from $15 an hour to the Amazon tax. But those bookends, also including the ferocious fight back and victories that we have won for renters, like no other council office in any recent history in Seattle. And so that's what the ruling class is fighting against, a successful example of encouragement for working people elsewhere. And it's understandable also why they would do it, why they are afraid, because the 15 Now movement, for example, that we launched here, that went nationwide. The Tax Amazon movement that we launched here, that is also now going to other cities.
And I just have to note as well, because we cover a lot of events here, global politics on Left Reckoning. And this is just another example of what, we would call in South America lawfare, right? Where you can't beat somebody at the ballot box, but you try to find ways to use the legal system to undermine a democratic, victories. Here in Austin, Texas, it's a very different kind of move, but you're seeing again where people voted to significantly pull back the budget for the police in Austin. And now there's basically another AstroTurf campaign that has popped up, to put, to basically undo all of that work in an off-year election in May, right? These tactics aren't just, unique to one area. They very much are being seen across the board. But just for folks who might not be familiar with what happened in Seattle over the past 6 months with the Black Lives Matter movement, could you sort of set the scene a little bit?
Yes. If you look at the last 4 years or 5 years since the original BLM movement started really coming out on the streets in 2014, 2015, believe it or not, at that time, I was the only elected representative in Seattle who was willing to publicly say Black Lives Matter. And 2014 was our first year in office. I was first elected in 2013. Since then, we've won 2 re-elections. But at that time, it was at such a point where no Democrat was willing to say that publicly. But now the movements have come so far, and especially the street protests last year laid down a serious political marker with 26 million people going out on the streets in multiracial working class solidarity against racism, against police violence. And really, the protests also captured the overall anger of the younger generations at the system that is not working for them at all. And so that really scared the ruling class. I mean, nothing scares the ruling class under capitalism more than working class people of different races and ethnicities, different genders coming together in solidarity. That solidarity is what scares them. And so at the height of the street protest, you saw Democratic establishment mayors and city council members, whether it was Seattle or Minneapolis or Boston or New York or Los Angeles or Austin, you saw endless promises from the Democrats about defunding the police, bringing in police accountability, really standing with Black Lives Matter. And not a day goes by now that a politician does not say Black Lives Matter. You saw Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer wearing kente cloth and on their knees. So you're seeing a lot of the what I think some in the movement might call performative politics that are supposed to represent real solidarity with BLM. But what did we see actually happening? So Seattle is a good example. So is Minneapolis. In the summer during the protests, we had 7 of the 8 council members, or maybe 6 of the 8 council members. There are 9 council members in the city. They are all Democrats. I'm a socialist. So virtually every council member said Black Lives Matter, pledged to defund the police by at least 50%, because that was the force of the movement, really, making it clear that if you didn't make those promises, there's going to be a real political price extracted from you. But then what happened just a few months later in the autumn, virtually every promise was backtracked on. And who was the only elected representative, only elected office that stood strong with the promise, but not only that, was still building on the streets to really win it? It was our socialist council office. So you saw promises on defunding being reneged. In fact, just yesterday, believe it or not, at a city council committee, a minimal promise of not allowing the Seattle Police Department to take home $5.4 million in extra overtime dollars, even that was defeated by the Democrats. It's just stunning the degree to which these promises to the Black Lives Matter movement have been betrayed. And another stunning example, in the height of the street protests, through my office, through the BLM movement, we were able to win a first in the nation historic ban on police use of weapons like tear gas, rubber bullets, plastic bullets, sonic, ultrasonic weapons, all these heinous weapons that are being used against peaceful protest movements and really against the left. We were able to win a ban against that, despite the both open and behind the scenes opposition of all these Democratic council members, because the movement was demanding it. I mean, it was incredible to watch hundreds of people angrily demanding in public testimony. That's why we won it. Well, guess what happened in February, just last month? Most of the ban was gutted, and that happened because there hasn't been a street movement. So anyway, long story short, what is the moral of this story that we on the left, we in movements have to take from this? What is the lesson for us? Is that we need mass movements on the streets. And it is through these movements that we need our own elected representatives who are not going to get elected and then sell out.
Mm-hmm.
Can you comment a little bit about more of your track record on big business? Obviously, go into the Amazon tax and talk about a bit of the money that you're coming up against that is also behind this recall effort.
Yeah, as you said correctly, Matt, in the 2019 election, it was quite a historic and unprecedented event where for one city council race, so much money was spent by the Chamber of Commerce. And you mentioned the Amazon $1 million money bomb in the last weeks of the election in order to try and not only defeat me, obviously that was the biggest prize that they wanted, defeating Socialist Alternative and driving socialists out of City Hall, but also they went after even minimally progressive council candidates because they wanted to do an entire sort of corporate takeover of City Hall, which they simply didn't succeed in, and working people delivered a resounding defeat to Jeff Bezos and the billionaires. But since they couldn't defeat us in the re-election, less than a year after we won the re-election, they launched a recall campaign. And if you look at the billionaire donors, and there are many billionaire donors to this recall campaign, you have odious figures like Martin Seelig, for example, who is a billionaire. He's an ICE landlord. He owns the building where the Seattle office of ICE is located. And he donated big amounts of money to Donald Trump. We also have, notably, many real estate billionaires who have donated both to Trump and to Biden. So I think that's also really telling that while there are differences between the Republican and Democratic parties, at the end of the day, the establishments of both parties serve the same Wall Street interests. And so you'll see many of these billionaires who donate to both the parties because for them, it's just they're hedging their bets. You know, they both those parties represent their interests. So you see that kind of billionaire push behind the recall campaign. And part of these billionaires are also basically real estate billionaires. And the reason is very clear. They are angry. Not only is big business as a whole angry about the specific victories we have won, whether it's $15 an hour or taxing big business to the Amazon tax to fund housing and Green New Deal programs, but it's also the whole host of renters' rights victories that we have won. And it should be made clear that it's not any one policy victory that puts the fear in the ruling class. It's the fact that we have completely transformed Seattle's political landscape by winning victory after victory after victory. And because the basis of those victories was not me being some sort of extraordinary individual, but our office, Socialist Alternative, my organization, us being clear that being rooted in the movement means that you have to use your office as an organizing tool for the movement. And it's the empowering of ordinary people, renters, workers, union members. That is what really brings the force. And that's the power behind the office I hold. It's not me. It's the fact that I'm willing to use my office. And I understand that I have to use my office to empower ordinary people. And just to quote Jamie Durkin, who used to be the top Seattle corporate landlord lobbyist, he happens to be the brother of the current mayor, Jenny Durkin. And you can see all these corporate tentacles running through the Democratic Party. And in fact, Jenny Durkin herself won her campaign with unprecedented amounts of money from Amazon, real estate, Comcast, CenturyLink, and so on. But Jamie Durkin, he recently retired as a lobbyist. And, famously, he said that, when they call council members, the council members, meaning the people who are willing to sell out to the corporate landlord lobby, they'll say, oh, yeah, we'll do what you want to do. Then they come on the dais, and to quote him, he said, these council members are confronted by Sawant's army. And then they forget all the promises made to the corporate landlord. So that's sometimes your enemies in the ruling class can give the movements the best compliments because they know what they are up against. And what he's pointing to is the fact that our office is bringing in this army of organized movements that is making it very clear to the council members, even if you don't stand with us, if you don't vote for our interests, you will pay a political price for it. So take your pick. That's the kind of pressure that we have brought to bear. And that is the kind of pressure we will need to bring if we are to win a federal $15 an hour or Medicare for all at the federal level.
So, yeah, it's so true that, like, one, you can definitely see why, the wealthy and members of the ruling class are very threatened by these kind of social movements with the Democratic Party as well, right? Because, like, as you were saying, you get to expose the symbolism when you have people showing up and saying, we actually want you to do what you said you were going to do in the first place. Just so it doesn't get lost, what is this recall process? And is there a counter movement that y'all are organizing as well?
Yes, the recall process is such that the state Supreme Court has to rule on whether the recall can go forward or not. And we don't believe that the court system under capitalism is any more on our side than is the police or any other institution of the capitalist state. So we are not just waiting, doing nothing till they rule. In fact, months ago, we launched what we have called the Kshama Solidarity campaign. Basically, it's the campaign against this recall campaign to defeat the recall. And we've called it a solidarity campaign because we are making it very clear this is not about me, it's not about my office, and it's not about socialist alternative. This is an attack on the socialist movement as a whole, and it's an attack on working class people. It's a message from the ruling class, from the elite, that you working people, you ordinary people, if you have the temerity to fight back, let alone win something for yourself, we will come and with a backlash against you. And it's also a reflection of how there is no universe where you can fight back and win and then not have the ire of the elite against you, because it highlights that it is a class struggle. This recall against us is a reminder that it is a class struggle. We didn't make it a class struggle. It is posed to us as a class struggle because of the way capitalism functions. And so our alternative is not to not fight for anything because there will be a backlash. Our approach should be that we should win those victories and then we should fight against the backlash. But it's important that you all based in Austin are talking about this, because we need national and indeed international solidarity against the recall, because we know this is an attack on the left as a whole. Before we had the second lockdown because of COVID here, we were already doing tabling and door knocking. Of course, we switched to phone banking because we want to make sure it is COVID safe. But once again, our volunteers, the members of the campaign are out there talking to people in the district. And what we are hearing from working people is that they're outraged that there is this recall campaign because they correctly understand it's an attack against them. We also need endorsements from the left from all around the country. So if somebody's watching this and there are left leaders, union leaders, community leaders who want to stand with us publicly, we need their voices to be heard as part of this campaign in solidarity against the recall.
Mm-hmm. And so the step would be, though, if the court rules one way, that they would have to collect signatures as well. Am I correct?
Yes. When the
and then
court
if they
rules, collect
that many signatures, that's it. It's a done deal.
No, if the court rules, which is the most likely scenario, that the recall can go forward, that means the recall campaign is then free to collect signatures in order to go on the ballot. If they collect enough signatures to go on the ballot, then, and it's not going to be straightforward because they have to collect thousands of signatures to get on the ballot. But if they do get on the ballot, then it will be an election that will trigger an election where voters will literally vote on it. And so one of the things we're doing in order to educate voters about what this is we have a decline to sign petition, meaning we are educating people about what the recall is about and then saying that, listen, let's get together, let's unite and decline to sign the recall petition and prevent them from getting on the ballot in the first place. So we need that solidarity in the first place. But if they do get on the ballot, then we will have to fight them at the ballot. One last thing I'll say about this whole process is that partly what they are relying on is that working people are so busy just putting food on the table, paying their rent, that we can't expect every working person who we know supports us is looped into every detail. Some may not even know yet about the recall campaign against us. So in other words, it's not only the recall is not only undemocratic in the sense that it is trying to undo an election result, It's also undemocratic because it is specifically relying on voters not knowing what's happening because they're so busy, not because they're stupid, but because they're so busy just getting their lives on track because of the cost that the pandemic and the recession has extracted from them, while billionaires have become more than $1 trillion richer. And this is not even me speculating. In fact, a spokesperson from the recall campaign went on right-wing radio, which itself is an indication of where they stand. But one of the things he freely admitted, probably inadvertently, I don't know, is that they were relying on low information that is available to voters. They were relying on a special election where people wouldn't know there was an election in the first place. So all of this shows how deeply undemocratic the whole process is.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's despicable. And yeah, and again, this is a tactic that we're seeing all across the country, and we'll definitely, point people into ways that they can support. We have people who listen in Washington, and also all across the country. So absolutely there. I wanted to take, in the last couple of minutes, because we had such a great opportunity to be able to speak with you about this. We've been, since we launched the show pretty recently, we're sort of trying to figure out how the lefts and socials can organize all across this country and do real left-wing politics, not just having the right opinions, but actually building the power to do things, right? Because there's been a lot of people on the left who have had good opinions for a long time. What matters is building that power to implement those ideas. You've been around in this city council for a significant amount of time, pre-Bernie, pre this Bernie movement that brought so many people into the socialist movement or thinking about themselves as socialists. Could you talk about that relationship between like the political office itself and the on the ground movements that have been built up in Seattle?
Absolutely. When we first ran for office in 2013, and as you said, it was pre-Bernie, though it has to be mentioned, of course, that the Bernie Sanders campaign captured the imagination of tens of millions of people around the country. We want campaigns of that scale where ordinary people can feel that, yes, I can have a role in actually shaping the collective future that we need. And the message of the political revolution against the billionaire class just spoke to so many people. It also shows the potential of how we can win over many Trump voters who are voting because they are just angry at corporate politics as a whole, not because they have been completely won over to some right-wing ideology. And so when we ran in 2013, we, through the conventional democratic, political campaign, hire a consultant, whatever, rule book out the window. We ran as a genuinely working class campaign. And that was virtually unheard of in our generations. And in fact, this is happening, Seattle's a socialist was elected in Seattle first socialist, elected in 100 years. So that gives you a certain time scale of how many generations have gone by. And what we did was we said, this is a campaign that wants to organize working people around concrete demands, and we want to win. We have a strategy to win for $15 an hour, minimum wage in Seattle, to tax the rich and big business, and to to have rent control and a bill of renters' rights for the city. And we were running as a socialist. At that time, it was in the wake of our participation in the Occupy movement. We helped lead the Occupy movement in Seattle. And it was clear to us that there was a real opening for the left. And when we first ran, we had no idea that we would win. And that also itself is educational for the left. I think we have to run campaigns because we cannot see building the left as broken up into little chunks of election campaigns that should be run only if you know that you're going to win. There's no such thing. And furthermore, if you're easily winning, then you're not actually representing working people. And I want to come back to that point in a second. But when we ran, we believed correctly, and certainly history has proved us correct in spades, that there was an opening for a $15 an hour demand and that people were angry. Occupy movement showed that ordinary people are looking for a strategy to fight back. It's a question of getting organized. It's not that there is any lack of anger on the ground. And so when we raised $15 an hour, many of the union leaders who were actually themselves fighting for $15 an hour in a neighboring small city where the airport is located, SeaTac, they didn't like that we were raising it because they had so little confidence in the working class embracing fighting demands. And they kept telling us, you should not raise it, don't do it. But we didn't agree with them, obviously. And what happened was the members of these union drifted to us immediately and said, I agree with this. I want to fight for this. In fact, there were so many union members who told us, I already make more than $15 an hour thanks to my union. I want to make sure other workers also are brought to at least $15 an hour, not only because it's a social justice issue, but because I know that the best protection for what I have is when other workers also win victories. It's an understanding, very, very important fundamental understanding of what solidarity in the working class means. It shows you that an injury to one is an injury to all, and that the best way to protect myself is to fight for you also against the ruling class. That's our common enemy. The billionaires, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, who have benefited so handsomely while impoverishing the rest of us, while making sure that the rents are soaring high. We have a stake in fighting together. And so that was a very important political sort of principle that guided everything we did. And we were able to shake things up so much that not only did we win the election, it immediately put the political establishment, the Democratic establishment, on notice. And just to explain to your viewers, I say the Democratic establishment because there is no Republican establishment to speak of in this city. For God knows how many decades, Seattle has been absolutely controlled by the Democratic establishment. So it forced the Democratic establishment to take on the question of 15, but they tried to do it in such a way that they thought that they could just engineer a coalition that, so-called coalition that included labor and me and big business together so that they could water it down and take it away from us. What we did is a very important education in how struggle should be conducted, where we refused to be marginalized or isolated, but we also refused to sell out. And the way we did that was by understanding that my ability to shift politics as an elected representative of working people does not come from trying to do my best in these inner circle, behind the scenes discussions and committees or whatever behind the camera that are off camera, but really by turning outward and bringing the power of social movements into the fore. And so while I was part of these committees, which they couldn't keep us out of because that's how much we had created momentum around 15, what we did alongside that was we built the grassroots 15 Now campaign. And Socialist Alternative and I, alongside a few progressive labor unions, we launched the 15 Now movement. And that movement had a fighting edge to it. We marched on the streets. We had a very strategic view of where we did not let the establishment get the upper hand at any time. And bottom line, the tactic that was the secret to our victory was we launched a grassroots ballot initiative that became a credible threat to the establishment. Basically, the message from us from 15 Now was, if city council Democrats do not pass $15 an hour in city hall chambers, we will take it to the voters directly and we will win a stronger 15. And so I think that the value of building such a strong organization and strategy through a democratically organized movement, I think I could not possibly overemphasize it. It's so crucial. That was also the backbone behind winning the Tax Amazon campaign, which we won last summer during the Black Lives Matter protests. Once again, we had a credible ballot initiative threat. And this is very important, especially in today's context, because at that time, some of the leaders in the movement, including some DSA leaders, were unfortunately saying, well, some people are saying this is not a Black issue, Tax Amazon is not a Black issue, we should not be raising it. But we said, look, let's not talk amongst ourselves. Let's go to the people. Let's see what the people are saying. And it was incredible. In 20 days of the protests, we collected 20,000 signatures at the protest. And people were literally grabbing the clipboard from us saying, hell yeah, I want to tax Amazon. And that's another tactical question that we proved other leaders wrong on, which is that many of the leaders in the movement did, genuine, well-meaning people, but they are, but this is to be highlighted. A lot of well-meaning leaders, including well-meaning elected officials, will be reluctant to have a head-on battle with the ruling class, with big business, because they think that that's not what's going to win. That's actually going to sink the ship. But the reality could not be more of the opposite than what they're saying. In fact, so these leaders, they hated that we called it the Amazon tax because they thought we wouldn't win on that basis. But that is precisely what allowed us to win, because when people were grabbing the clipboards from us, what they were angry about was Amazon. They know how these billionaires have, benefited from this city at their detriment, to their detriment. They wanted to tax Amazon. So it was anger against Amazon that was really fueling the energy. And so all of these tactics are important. But at the end of the day, the moral of the story is you have to organize ordinary people and convert that into a credible threat against the establishment.
Yeah, well, I mean that's very well said, and so many really important lessons. And I really just have to thank you so much for joining us today. Please, we'll be sure to share information of people how they can get involved and help out, and hope to be able to talk to you again sometime in the future.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kshama.
Thank you.
Well, welcome back, everybody. That was a really fun conversation with Kshama Sawant, and not to hint too much, but I think we're definitely going to have a longer conversation about kind of municipal strategy, because we had a very fun conversation after we finished recording that we definitely want to make public sometime in the future. But thank you so much, Woz. We're joined by our friend Wosny Lambre here on Left Reckoning. I'm really thrilled to have you joining us today.
Hey man, it's a pleasure. Whenever I heard you guys were starting this, I was very happy because I know how serious you guys take the work. And, I believe in you guys as voices, as talents in our little movement, so it makes me happy to see you guys start this and being successful so early, hitting the ground running. And obviously I'm proud that you guys would call me to ask me to come on, because you know how I feel about you guys. So I'm happy to be here, man.
I have to return the favor. Waz is, I think, my favorite podcaster. I'd often think of. I probably have listened to Waz talk about basketball more than I've actually watched basketball. We'll get to to hear him, a guy that I remember, doing Two Dope Boys with Michael and Phil back in the day. To hear how much David Aldridge laugh. Like the OG of NBA reporting is one of my favorite, most gratifying relationships I have, I think, through you. So I love your stuff. And, the glue guy, whether it's Zach Harper or David Aldridge, I think Waz brings a podcast together. So,
what's so funny about that is I see that as my job, right? Especially in in certain spaces, like, when I got asked if I wanted to do a podcast with DA, I was like, are you out of your mind? Of course I do, right? And DA is like, if you've been an NBA fan at all over the past 3 decades, you're very familiar with his work. He's like a really dignified, professional cat, right? Like, so, I just said it's my job to bring the hijinks, because DA is a real professional. Like, this guy he's the truth, and not that he doesn't have a sense of humor or anything like that, but, he's been broadcasting for decades. He's actually in the freaking Basketball Hall of Fame. So, yeah, it is my job to go on there and sort of be a goofball and, get Iron Eagle to laugh at dick jokes or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the kind of thing that I feel like it's my job to do on that show.
Yeah, well, before we get to more basketball, which I'm excited to do, secretly I would just rather be a basketball podcaster. But David, you want to update us on some more shenanigans out of Alabama that just broke in the last interview?
Yeah, I'm sorry to break format here, but we just got some kind of breaking news, and this fight is really important, and it's happening right now. We won't have a chance till next week. Just some things that have broken. This first tweet, if you could just pull up, Matt. We've talked about this a lot, how Amazon is trying to interfere with the union election. More Perfect Union has actually, revealed that they went and they spoke with the Postmaster General in Bessemer, who was refusing to give them any information about this mysterious post box that showed up on the Amazon facility, right? And people are mailing in their ballots. So this is a serious question of them tampering with people's ballots. They put it in there from direct order, essentially, from Amazon, even though the National Labor Relations Board said they are not allowed to do that. Right. So this is just one example of how they're tampering. And if we want to go to the second tweet, because this is the one, like, that's screwy and very dangerous, and it makes you worried about the integrity of that election. I'm serious, right? But this is the one that gets very frightening, which is, this is coming from More Perfect Union, again, highlighted by Kim Kelly, and which is that Amazon has been paying police officers in Bessemer to do off-duty security, right? The police, we all know, fuck the police, that, the whole thing. But the police, ostensibly are not supposed to be just guns for hire for private corporations. That line has very seriously been crossed. And if we could just play, the first minute of this video, I think it'd be worthwhile.
They in prison.
When you are going to work every day with a heavy police presence, I think it absolutely levels this fear of what could happen.
Again, it shows the way in which the anti-union forces get all involved with local political forces. The Bessemer police officers have been here on scene since day one. We feel like we've been harassed. We had cops tell us that we couldn't step off the sidewalk.
When we're on the gates, the police ride around to our checkpoints.
I mean, they're in the parking lot at all times. From the second you pull up.
That's good.
Jesus.
Yeah. And again, I think everybody watching this knows how serious that is. but a union election should be something that's free from intimidation. We already talked about the intimidation that the company is doing, in the workplace. We already know about the intimidation that Amazon workers face for the fact that they have to pee in bottles because they're afraid of getting in trouble. But also basically using, an armed force around to harass and intimidate people. It's a very serious question about democracy.
Yeah, overtime the police, I guess.
It's crazy because obviously on our show on Woke Bros, we've been monitoring the Bessemer situation pretty closely because everybody kind of understands what the stakes are with Amazon being a company that employs, I think they might be in the millions by now worldwide. And so, a unionization drive here in America would mean a lot. It'd be devastating for them anyway. It'd be obviously a great win for the workers, but it'd be devastating for them. So it's not surprising that they would deploy these tactics because, a lot of people don't realize this. A lot of times in mainstream media, the perception that we've gotten of organized labor is like, oh, they're mobbed up, they're criminal, it's corrupt, and yada, 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 yada. Well, the reason why the mob got involved in union business is because the bosses used to actually hire their own goons to bust skulls.
Exactly.
Right.
They had to level the freaking playing field. The only way that they could do that was to hire their own goons and thugs to protect themselves. But trust me, it was freaking capital who started this, man. And this is no different from traditionally what they would do. It's just all intimidation tactics. Luckily, back in the days, like people actually died for the right for, a 5-day work week, 8-hour work day, vacation days, sick leave, like anti-child labor laws. Or like people literally died because the bosses would rather intimidate people than just do the right thing and give people their fair share as far as the wages and, having dignified work conditions. Like we're not even talking about anything like ridiculous. We're just talking about the bare necessities here from the richest company in the world.
Yeah, man. And it's crazy too. I don't know. Have you heard about this stoplight thing that they did? So basically, like there's a stoplight that goes into the facility and, pro-union organizers were hanging out there when people came into work. It's like, hey, join the union, pretty simple, just like democracy stuff. They actually got, I can't remember, our friends at Valley Labor Report have set me straight on this, but I can't remember if it was the city or the county, but they got the government to come in and change the time on the stoplight so that it was only like a 10-second stoplight or something like that, so nobody could be spoken to. I mean, it's just crazy the amount of influence that Amazon has. But the cool thing about it, and one thing that's really been like giving me a lot of hope, is how widespread like the solidarity actually for the union has been. And it's like international, people who are super lefty plugged in like us to like, the NFL Players Association union was like coming out and, solidarity with them. Like it's a really incredible moment to see that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. For Seattle, I know there are some Seattle viewers in the chat, and we will talk to Woz about getting a team back in Seattle. But first, I think it's probably more appropriate to talk about the NBA Players Association, a story that Woz alluded to with DA earlier this week. And Elgin Baylor passed away. Elgin Baylor is a player who is from the generation that my dad always talks about, like that when he was like in his grade school years. He always talked to me about him, Oscar Robertson, and I think Jerry West. I think are the big three in this story. Tell us. I had not heard about this, and this is amazing. The story of the 1964 threatened All-Star Game strike.
Yeah, so if you do the history, like they had been trying to get the owners to recognize their union, the NBA Players Association, as it's known today, for years, and they were getting strong-armed, right? And so what they did, and Bill Russell, who obviously is known to be, he has a reputation for being a civil rights leader. He was at the forefront of all of it at the time, right? Like meeting with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Muhammad Ali, et cetera, et cetera. And the NBA players decided what they would do at the 1964 All-Star Game is stage a strike. And before the game, they told the commissioner, they said, look, you got all them people out there that paid their money. You got the TV people who have their contracts, the sponsors. We're not going out there unless you recognize the NBA Players Union. and it worked. And they freaking capitulated on site. Said, no, please just go ahead, have your union and just go to and it's a beautiful story. One, I brought it up in reference to Elgin Baylor because he was one of the biggest stars in the NBA at the time, right? It's him, Jerry West, Oscar, Bill Russell, as you mentioned, Jerry Lucas, all of these hugely influential guys. They were the stars of the league at the time. And for them to use their influence and recognize the only leverage that they had was to threaten the money. You have to threaten the bottom line of these people. They don't just concede power on their own. It always has to be taken out of their grubby ass hands, right? And so the NBA players, the stars of that day, they decided look, they struck at the most opportunistic moment, right? Where they had these guys by the freaking, by the balls. And so, and it worked. And it's, and it's one of those things you don't hear about because I don't think it's something that the oligarchs want people to realize the power that you have in a workers' strike, right? Like they don't want us to know that the general citizenry, or else that story should be in history books. Like,
absolutely.
Not just for organized labor, but just American sports. Like think about all of the gains that have been made for players. For the fact of having a players union, right? Like players, it's like this is a time when certain cats couldn't stay in certain hotels on the road, right? Like we're talking about a really pivotal time when it comes to civil rights and human rights in American history. And so, obviously it's one of those things that we understand how important it is, but I think the power structure does too, or else they would be celebrating. There's a reason why they're not celebrating it.
Yeah, I just want to quote a little bit from this LA Times story here. Just some fascinating points. The All-Star Game was being televised, as you mentioned, for the first time in 1964. A big deal to the league owners who were pleased to hear about the budding revolt. At times, certain owners would try to get players out of the locker room and browbeat them, Heinsohn said. Red Auerbach, the Boston Celtics general manager and coach, angrily told Heinsohn that he was the biggest heel in sports. So Auerbach was against the union. Interesting. Of course. Interesting to know, obviously. Celtics, yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Laker owner Bob Short approached the locker room in a fury. He said to an Irish cop that guarded the tell Elgin Baylor if he doesn't get out of there, he's through, Heinsohn said. Baylor's response, sorry, Bob. Lakers star Jerry West, then 25. This stuff is just amazing to hear. Like he's 20. Imagining Jerry West at 25. Then 25, and his fourth season stood his ground with Baylor. I was young and just trying to feel my way along and build a career for myself, West said. Short said to us very threateningly, if you don't play in this game, you're probably never going to play again. Imagine saying that to Jerry West. Jesus Christ. And I said then, I'm never going to play a game. I am pretty defiant. And I mean, yeah, just an amazing story. Like you said, there's this history that like falls through the cracks because our memories are controlled by capitalists, basically. I
mean, they control what stories get told, what stories get marketed, what stories get pushed out. Just think about Martin Luther King as an easy example. Like, they never associate the word socialism with the great Dr. King. They don't want you knowing about the Poor People's Campaign and the Poor People's March on Washington. They don't want you to understand that Martin Luther King was trying to unite people across gender based on the class question. Like, not some kumbaya pie in the sky type of situation. No, literally based on the idea that the commonalities outweighed the little cultural differences that people thought mattered. Based on the idea that the bosses were using all of that stuff to sow dissent, and it was nonsense. We needed to get the poor white people on board with the poor blacks and Latinos of the country. But you're not going to hear that. You're just going to hear, more, what's the arc of the moral universe bends towards these nuts.
Bends towards justice.
Right.
I don't fucking know. I don't know. It's just, all you ever hear is the gushy stuff. You never hear about the hardcore stuff that he was about. You feel me?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, especially with like the NBA union too, right? Look at what the NBA is today, and there's no doubt about it. Like we've talked about this before about like, the NBA is really in a lot of ways becoming more and more of a players. Like the players have an incredible amount of power compared to other professional sports, and the union is a huge part of that.
100%. And the thing is, they're just now even just tapping into that,
right.
that power and that understanding of how important they were. I feel like for a long time, and one of my favorite things about the pandemic is how much it exposed oligarchs for the phonies that they are, right? Just the idea that if somebody's unemployed, if somebody's like loses their job, it was like, well, you should have had 3 months rent saved up in your bank account.
Mm-hmm.
The pandemic wasn't out for 2 weeks before these fools were like, Can I have a check, please? Treasury Department, Fed, can I have some money, please? And nobody browbeat them. Nobody said, yo, you guys are art capitalists. You guys are supposed to be the best people with money. Where's your rainy day fund? Where's your this? None of it. They didn't hesitate to write a check. They didn't hesitate to guarantee, certain financial instruments from the stock market, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody said, wait, where's your 3 months rent? Yeah. Nobody said that to them. But when normal people fall on hard times, you're an idiot. You're a dummy. Where's your savings? How come you're not prepared for a rainy day? Oh, you didn't plan ahead. You're worthless, right? But I think with the pandemic, and you've seen the ownership class so thirsty to get the season started back, so thirsty to get money coming back. It kind of put, it laid bare that it's a joke whenever there's collective bargaining sessions happening, when people say, yo, the owners can sit back and just wait for the season and not happen because they're so rich and they're so financially stable. These black players, they spend so frivolously. They don't. Yeah, right. Tillman Fertitta took out a loan at 20% interest for $300 million, bro. That's how broke this fool is. And he's an owner. So I love what the pandemic was able to lay bare about the capitalist class, about these lies that get told to us, about how they're just so much smarter than us. They're just so much better than us at everything. That's the only reason they're so rich, and not that because, everything's been set up for them to succeed.
Where do you think we are at for like sort of player labor strength? Because, it strikes me that a lot of my first glimpses of labor was like 99, was it the strike? And then there's also, I was a Timberwolves fan when there was all this talk about how much KG was making. And, I know you talk about the sort of LeBron era of player power. Where are we at now? And I guess, do you see us entering a new era with this COVID stuff?
It's interesting, and I think the bubble sort of exposed it too. NBA players are now becoming so rich that LeBron is not really a worker anymore, right? Like he's still an employee in the NBA, but he's grown to be so powerful. He's got a lot more in common with, let's face it, with Tillman Fertitta than he does the 15 man on the Lakers bench.
Right.
The guy who's making $2 million a year this year. Like LeBron is so filthy. I'm talking about rich, not like corrupt or anything like that. I'm interested to see what direction these things go towards, because although LeBron is in the context of the NBA, obviously an employee and a worker, out in the greater society, like when the Milwaukee Bucks basically were like, we're not coming out because the cops just killed this dude in Kenosha, and we're not going to play. And they had the players only meeting, and they were deciding the best course of action to move forward. LeBron got Barack Obama on the phone.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's a guy that is firmly entrenched within the power structure. If Barry is one phone call away from you, and what did Barry tell him to do? Tell him to vote.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Vote. That's it. Tell him to just vote. Vote. So I'm interested to see the direction these things go towards, because again, like, the TV contracts are at record numbers. And so players are they're being enriched in ways that we've never seen before. Right. So I'm interested to see what direction this goes towards, because I think they are in a position, they have an opportunity for Dr. Martin Luther King Day. I said, man, if the players really wanted to honor the legacy of Dr. King, they would pick up the mantle of the Poor People's Campaign. They would make the plight of working poor people in America that of the NBA players. They'd make themselves the faces of that. And I don't think there's nobody on Fox News, nobody on Hate Radio could talk talk slick about fighting for the rights of the working poor. Like, and again, because it's multicultural, multiracial, the amount of working poor in this country, I think they would be great to do that. But LeBron James is. Could LeBron James be the face of Bessemer, Alabama?
Right.
Like when the NBA, I think, is in a partnership with Amazon.com. Like who knows what his relationship with Warner Media means, right?
You don't
like
have conservatives trolling him over that instead of fucking China all the time too.
Yeah,
exactly.
Man, that was. I just wanted to throw this line because I was on the Jackman show yesterday, and Ariella, who's the host there, wonderful host, a great show. People should check it out. Was making this really interesting point because we were talking about musicians and unions for musicians, because that's a similar kind of problem, right? Where you have superstars, people who are dealing with issues with streaming services, but obviously like Taylor Swift is very different from just someone who plays clubs and might have a couple records out on Spotify. But Ariel was making this point that we talk a lot about like the solidarity and like the humanity of unions, and it's very important. But like fundamentally, what the potential here is risk sharing, right? And at a certain point, it's also just like self-interest, right? So it's like, even though like LeBron James might not be super personally invested in all of these other folks, the 15th man, whatever, like he does have some interest in risk sharing with other folks. What it would mean if you want to take on the owners or the NBA in general, right? Like that's the real potential there. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a wonderful point. I wonder how top of mind that type of solidarity is.
Oh, I'm sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, of
like
course.
When you get to be that rich and that successful, and you are from freaking Akron, Ohio, from a poor background, right? It's like, man, I've done a lot to get to where I'm at right now, like a lot. So I wonder if just the notion of a greater good is there, and especially when you get to tell yourself, I'm building schools in my hometown, and I'm lifting people out of poverty, X, Y, and Z. I don't know. It's something to definitely think about, and it's something that I'm always going to talk about in my work. But we'll see what direction these guys take it.
Yeah, because I think commentary, especially last summer, over certain players and the entertainment function that they serve, and being like, is this really what I want to be doing? It's like in an era where there's a huge amount of money, it's hard, but yeah. Let's move on a little bit. We have a bunch of Seattle followers, Waz. This take, I think, might get us in trouble with some of maybe our small market fans, but Seattle doesn't have a basketball team. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's criminal. It's absolutely criminal. The way David Stern, Clay Bennett, and the Starbucks fool, I forget what's his name?
Howard Schultz, I think.
Howard Schultz. The way
Howard
they conducted that entire business transaction was freaking shameful. It was horrible. And by the way, and look, OKC has dedicated fans. Like the people in that area love OKC. And it's crazy. I met somebody over the summer who's from Oklahoma, and he actually, he gave me a perspective of that team helped the sort of collective self-esteem of that town in a way that we can't understand. Like getting that team made Oklahoma City people feel like they lived in a real city, right? Like they were a city worthy of respect and glory and attention just by virtue of having that team. And then the team being very successful right out the gate and all of that helps. But like what that team means to those people in that area is very interesting. And then, something else to think about, because it's a sidetrack, but like the idea that these black dudes did that for y'all,
yes.
In that part of the country is just a fascinating thing to think, especially how Oklahomans self-identify, right? It's interesting that Russell Westbrook, a guy from South Central LA, KD, James Harden, Serge Ibaka from, the Congo, like These are the guys responsible for lifting your collective self-esteem and self-worth as Oklahomans, as Okies, quite frankly. It's just a fascinating sort of dichotomy. But, my man Ethan Strauss talks about it the other day. Like, the NBA has been so kind of stupid and rock-headed about market allocation. Like, the idea that you would have a team in Memphis and not one in Seattle just makes absolutely no freaking sense. When you talk about the amount of money, the amount of economics involved with a city like Seattle, is one of our richest cities, and just the sheer market size, the amount of people that are there. When you compare it to a New Orleans, a Memphis, a Oklahoma City, the NBA has been just so inefficient about it. But, they've come out and said basically they're willing to add 2 teams to the league. I think one of those teams is 100% going to be earmarked for Seattle. We'll see where the next one comes from, whether it be Kansas City, whether it be a St. Louis, whether it be a Las Vegas, which I know the league is scared of having a team there. But we'll see what they decide on for the other team. But they've already basically said we're adding 2 teams, and I would be shocked if one of them was not Seattle.
They should stick with the Sonics, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the Thunder they've jettisoned all Sonics history. It's not like they invite Gary Payton and Sean Kemp for Sonics night to games, right? Like, they've tried to basically forge their own path in that regards. And the team should be called the Sonics, and they should get the records and the history that was there. Because like Seattle, not even just that the team, the town loved the team, like Seattle and that area has such a rich basketball tradition. Like, in the recent years, like when you go from Nate Robinson to Brandon Roy to Jamal Crawford to all of these cats to Isaiah Thomas and all of these guys that are from that area, like Seattle is a basketball hotbed. Like, these people love our game. It's honestly, and this is not even to suck up to the guys who Seattle people who might be listening to this. It's awful, and they need to get back. The NBA in Seattle.
Awesome. And one final basketball question while I have you. I, growing up in the Michael Jordan era, always liked the superstar wing. That's like my favorite model basketball player. So I went easily to Kobe. My first sort of username online was Kobe Tracy 07 because I thought Tracy would join Kobe Bryant that year, and it didn't end up happening. Now, fast forward now, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard play on the same team. They are I've been a Paul George fan since that Pacers LeBron series. Mm-hmm. And Kawhi, you don't need to say anything about his defense and how great he is. And every time they play the Mavs, Luka Doncic, who I think you describe as Gordon Hayward on crack, absolutely roasts them. What the hell is going on? Because I haven't heard anybody comment. I was looking to see if you guys, your podcast, commented on Paul George guard Luke at the end of that game, and I don't know what happens. He just goes to the floor on a behind the back dribble. Like, I don't know what's happening that Luke could just toast those guys so much.
Well, I mean, it just goes to I don't think that's an indictment of Paul George or Kawhi Leonard. I think it's just Luka Doncic is that special of a player.
Right.
His understanding of angles, his understanding of change of pace, change of speed. He's savant like with that stuff, that part of the game. It's not because people think like if you don't have the raw speed to run in a straight line that you can't get by anybody. No, it's like he knows where he's going and the defender doesn't.
Right.
And so he understands what his advantages and he understands angles. He understands once he gets his shoulder past somebody, he's big enough to absorb any kind of contact so that guys can't bother his shot. He's developed a mean killer step back. So people respect the drive. So they have to give him a little bit of space. So when he does go to the step back, there's plenty of room and airspace to get his shot off. I just think he is a one of a kind, once in a generational talent. That's what's happening there. Kawhi Leonard is certainly not. He's not the defensive player of the year level guy that he once was. None of us are right anymore.
Yeah. Who do you watch on the defensive side of the ball now? Is it Ben Simmons or who are you watching?
I think perimeter wise, you would have to say Ben Simmons is one of the ones. Joel Embiid also incredible defender. I love Mikal Bridges from the Phoenix
Oh, yeah.
Suns. Like, this guy is long. He's quick-footed. He has the instincts. He can guard wings. He plays the passing lanes. Like, he's a really fun guy to watch play defense. But, yeah, I think and you know what I like about Ben Simmons, and I said this recently on the show, I think there's something to the idea that he's gone out of his way to let people know that he takes pride in his defense.
Yeah.
That, no, I'm not going to drop 30 a game, but I get busy on the defensive end of the floor. I bust my ass, and I know that that's what helps my team win at the end of the day, right? So I think just mentality-wise, that's something, if you're a Sixers fan, you should be very happy about, because let's face it, everybody wants to be the guy that dropped 30. Everybody wants, because that's the guy who gets the commercials and goes to the All-Star games, et cetera, and gets the girl. But, you know, defense is, it's not, people always say it's just as important as offense. It's not. It's that there's studies that and metrics to prove that, like, it's a lot easier to get a guy who's a bad defender to be competent at defense than it is to get a bad offensive guy to be competent at offense. So offense is just it's just more premium of skill. But defense is important. And a lot of teams, the Lakers of last year being a prime example, they won that championship on the back of their elite defense. Right. If you watch Game 6 of the NBA Finals, Anthony Davis is somebody, when he's to start the year, trust me, if you've been watching that all in the NBA, Anthony Davis has not tried. But if you go back and watch Game 6 of the NBA Finals, he was insane. He was everywhere. He was destroying people. And so that's what propelled them to the championship. So, you know, those type of cats are cats that I love watching. People that take their defensive assignment, take pride in the defense that they play.
Yeah, it's funny, just to go back to the Clippers. I remember all those years with Chris Paul and DeAndre and Blake, they needed a 3-and-D wing. And they just could never get that guy. And now they have like two of the best in the league.
I know. They went through so many, like, you know, it was like a Matt Barnes, and then there was the Ross dude, and there was all of these Bobby Simmons, Bobby Simmons, and all these other wings. They could never get it right. And now they have two, you know, Tyrannosaurus Rex type of cats who will just destroy people. And I think in the playoffs, having elite wing play has proven to be what gets you to the championship, right? Like, it's having the LeBrons, having the KDs, having the Kawhis, having these 6'8" guys who can dribble, pass, and shoot has proven to be the best way to achieve playoff success. So I think the Clippers are well positioned to do their thing in the playoffs. And in the last 2 years, they've been the team that's given the Lakers the biggest matchup problem of anybody in the league. Obviously, we see what's going on in Brooklyn, where KD's not even back yet, and they're just drubbing fools and, you know, setting scoring records. All-time scoring records. So I think the teams with the wing depth are generally the teams that you got to pay attention to.
Right. Well, Wosny Lambre, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah,
Salute to you, brothers. I'm very proud of you. I love what you guys are doing. You guys are fucking carrying the torch and doing it so well with the integrity and just, you know, just dominating, man. You guys are dominating the left media space, man.
Thanks so much, man. We're going to get together soon.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
sir. Love you guys, man. Be good.
See you, Wes.
That was fun.
Man, I love that. It's great to be able to talk to, basketball with one of the foremost basketball minds in the country, but also, like, you know, it's a great guy. So
yeah,
exactly. We have. Are we good? Bill Gates. Is that who we're talking about now? Do you want to?
Yeah, do we want to do that? I thought we were doing that post game.
So what did we? I forget what we. I kind of got lost in basketball. I have 3-and-D wings in mind. So
yeah, I think you need to take a second, you know, get some fresh air and reset so we can get into this in the post game.
Cool. All right, folks. So we will. Yeah, it is already 9:30. 8:30 your time. 6:30 Waz's time.
It's okay,
I have to do all that math now.
What time is it in Calcutta?
I need those clocks. Like,
honestly, I need those too. It fucks me up still.
Yeah, patreon.com/leftreckoning if you want to access the post game. We're going to talk about Bill Gates, talk about Marx. Keep Comments on the name of your nerd mouth, you nerd. And I'm going to talk about Montana and what else you want to tease, David?
We'll also be taking questions from the Discord. So
Absolutely.
sign up at patreon.com/left reckoning and you can get those into us too.
All right, folks, we will see you. We'll see the patrons in a little bit. See you next week, everybody else.